Hello. My name's Scarlett Keene. At Christmas dinner, while the ham was still warm and the wine half full, my parents raised their glasses and cut me out of the family. My sister clinked hers proudly and said, "To a new family." Without Scarlett, the room erupted in applause. No one hesitated. Not even my brother. Not even my mother. They thought I'd disappear quietly, like some footnote in their legacy. But what they didn't know was that I had already planned the end of their luxury life. What kind of family celebrates your exile with champagne? And what would you do if it happened to you? Christmas Eve in Naperville, Illinois. Outside, the world looked like a postcard, soft snow falling under porch lights, wreaths on every door, and a scent of glazed ham and cinnamon drifting through the neighborhood. From the driveway, my parents' house radiated warmth. Gold ribbons wrapped around banisters, ornaments sparkled on the tree, the whole scene choreographed for holiday perfection. But inside, something was off. The air felt tense, tight, as if everyone was forcing smiles and pretending we weren't seconds from a storm. I was the first to arrive. I always was. Came early to help Mom. Not that she ever asked, but someone had to. As I stepped inside, she didn't greet me, just gestured to the dining table and said, "Napkins, Scarlett," with that familiar clipped tone. No Merry Christmas. No hug. Just a job. 20 minutes later, Sable swept in like the queen of the evening. Her red dress shimmered, her hair curled to perfection, and her entrance was timed like a stage cue. She hugged me, a quick, cold thing, then stepped back with a polished smile. "You look cozy," she said, eyeing my navy sweater. That was her gift. A compliment that scratched instead of soothed. As guests filtered in, cousins, aunts, neighbors, I did what I always did. Smiled. Helped pass appetizers. Made sure everyone had what they needed. I knew my role. The background support to Sable's main act. Mom trailed her like an assistant. Dad, Orion, hung on her every word like she was some genius storyteller. I'd given up expecting attention years ago. The dining room looked straight out of a magazine. The chandelier cast a golden glow. The silverware gleamed. We all took our seats, and I ended up in that awkward middle zone, not near the head of the table, not with the kids. Just there. Then Mom stood and gently tapped her spoon against her glass. "Before we begin," she said with a smile, "I just want to say thank you all for being here. This has been a year of big changes." Something in her tone made my spine tighten. My hands froze on my lap. Then she said it, softly, like she was announcing dessert. "From now on, Scarlett is no longer part of this family." I blinked. Once. Twice. My brain fumbled for meaning. Did she really say that? And then clapping. Actual clapping. Not hesitant or confused. A confident, rehearsed applause. My aunts. My cousins. Even a neighbor I once helped file her taxes. They clapped like she'd just made a generous donation to charity. Dad stared into his wine. Sable leaned back, smirking like she'd waited years for this moment. I sat frozen. Not a tear, not a word. Just silence swallowing me whole. Mom continued, voice light. "Scarlett has chosen a different path. We wish her well. But tonight, we move forward as a family. As a family. Without me." I forced a breath into my lungs. "Mom," my voice came out small. "What are you talking about?" She smiled, that politician smile. "Sweetheart, this is what's best for everyone." Sweetheart. As if she hadn't just exiled me with a smile. Then Sable stood, glass raised. "To our new family," she said brightly, "one without Scarlett." The room laughed. Real laughter. Loud. Warm. Sharp. I didn't move. Couldn't. I watched their faces blur. Heard forks scraping plates. Someone asked for more wine. Someone else joked about vacations. I sat there, untouched plate in front of me, heart cracking quietly inside my chest. At one point, my father mumbled something about letting go. His hands shook slightly, but he never looked at me. Mom floated from chair to chair like nothing happened, smiling, chatting, avoiding me completely. Sable twirled her champagne flute, glowing like she'd won. And maybe she had. Inside, something cold began to form, a quiet clarity. I remembered every Christmas I'd bent over backward to make special. The gifts I wrapped. The bills I covered. The coat I gave Mom that she never wore because Sable said it looked cheap. I remembered the year I moved out and Mom called crying. "Family sticks together, Scarlett," she had said. "You can't just walk away." And now she was the one pushing me out. The laugh they shared over dessert was the final crack. I stood, slow and calm, and suddenly every eye turned. Not with regret, just curiosity. Like they were watching a scene play out they'd all read in the script. I folded my napkin, placed it beside my plate, and said simply, "Thank you for making things clear." No one stopped me.
No one asked me to stay.
I looked at Sable. "Enjoy your new family." She tilted her glass. "Oh, we will." Something inside me shifted then.
I didn't cry. I didn't beg.
I smiled, because I understood. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was rehearsed.
Planned.
They'd prepared to erase me. But what they didn't plan for was what I'd become once I no longer had to pretend. I sat back down.
Watched.
Listened. Let the rest of the evening unfold like a play. I etched every laugh, every whisper into memory. By the time the last toast came, I raised my glass too, not out of celebration, but as a promise. "You just made the biggest mistake of your lives," I whispered.
And I meant it.
I didn't stay at the dinner because I wanted to. I stayed because I needed to see. Every smirk, every shared glance, every whispered remark that wasn't meant for me. I absorbed it all. I stayed until the laughter thinned out into yawns and goodbyes, until the clinking of glasses gave way to silence and cold plates. I watched them peel away their masks as the hours wore on. Sable's heel tapped in a rhythm I once found elegant. Now, it echoed with something smug. I listened until the last guest left and the last fork hit porcelain. The house grew quiet, shrouded in midnight shadows, except for the soft glow of a hallway lamp. I walked past the gallery of family portraits. I used to be in them, smiling, centered, loved. Now most had me cropped out. In others, my image was carefully obscured by shadows or other people's arms. It was a subtle erasure, but I saw it clearly. They were rewriting history. Near the kitchen, the seating chart from earlier was still pinned to the corkboard. I approached it slowly. I scanned the names. Sable and family sat at the top, in decorative gold print. There was no Scarlet. Not even at the children's table. No place had been planned for me. My absence had been decided before I ever showed up. A slip of paper fell from the side of the board. It was a discarded card, reserved for Sable's inner circle. The phrase mocked me. I wasn't even in the outer one. Morning crept in with a pale, reluctant sun. Michigan's winter had settled heavy on the windows, frosting the edges like nature's quiet protest. I got dressed slowly, in silence. My fingers lingered on the ring I hadn't removed in years, a gift from my father when I graduated. This morning, it felt like it belonged to someone else. They reopened the dining room for brunch, a contrived tradition to squeeze out one last photo opportunity, one last illusion of unity. I was directed to a chair at the far end of a table. It was narrower, with frayed upholstery, wedged near the drafty window. No name card. No folded napkin. Just me, sitting at the margin of a table that once felt like home. Across the room, the main seats shimmered with polished silverware and festive centerpieces. Laughter filled the air like perfume, sweet, lingering, and suffocating. I caught Sable's eye. She was radiant, dressed in winter white, chatting with Dad like she'd already inherited the throne. His laugh came too easily. Her smile came too often. I was the ghost at the feast, present but not counted. Then came the greeting cards, delicately printed, coordinated with the brunch decor. Each guest received one. A cousin passed mine down the table. I turned it over slowly. The front read, in flowing script, "To Starlet with love." My fingers tightened.
Starlet.
It was a name my mother had used when I was little, meant to be affectionate, but always said with a condescending smile, as though I was a child pretending to matter. Hearing it now, printed for everyone to see, felt like a slap wrapped in glitter. I cleared my throat. "That's not my name." Mom looked up, calm and composed, sipping her tea. I thought it sounded poetic. Her voice was gentle, too gentle, like lace hiding a blade. I gave her a thin smile. "It's Scarlet. Please." She nodded, vaguely. "Of course." No apology. No change. The cards were already handed out. The damage was done. Later, Orion stood. His voice was smooth, trained, almost presidential. He held up his glass. "To family, the strongest bond we share. To unity, perseverance, and unconditional love." Heads nodded. Smiles bloomed. Names followed: Sable, her husband, their daughter, our cousins. My name was never spoken. I stared at my plate. They spoke of love, of giving, of loyalty. And yet when the mortgage needed paying, it was my name on the wire transfer. When Dad's credit slipped, it was my savings that bought time. I never asked for thanks, but I didn't expect to be forgotten. And still, I would not beg. I would not perform my worth for them. In the quiet of the night before, I had written a note, just 7 words, scribbled on a napkin. Received.
Logged.
Remembered. Adjustments will follow in kind. When the chatter dipped, I slid the note toward Sable's plate. She glanced down. Her expression twitched. Curiosity, then confusion, then the calculated smirk she reserved for threats that didn't scare her. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. My silence was intentional, precise, a blade tucked in velvet. A few minutes later, I saw her lean toward Mother, whispering. I didn't catch everything, just one word. Watch. It sent a chill up my spine. They had moved from ignoring me to monitoring me. Brunch ended with soft clatters and polite goodbyes. I stood, brushed imaginary dust off my coat, and straightened my shoulders. The room felt tighter, as if the walls themselves knew what had just transpired. Before leaving, I glanced back once. Around the table sat the characters of a play I no longer auditioned for. Sable, the heir apparent. Dad, her loyal backer. Mom, the silent orchestrator. In the window's reflection, I didn't see the outsider they wanted me to be. I saw a woman with clarity. I walked out without a word, without a glance. And in that moment, I knew this exile wasn't accidental. It had been rehearsed long before I arrived. The wind howled through the old siding of my parents' house like it was trying to warn me. I had left the dining room hours ago, but their laughter still rang faintly in my head, a cruel melody I couldn't silence. I didn't sleep much. My body begged for rest, but my mind replayed every smirk, every sentence, every cold glance from that dinner table. They had planned it. Maybe not just for weeks, maybe for years. And I had walked right into it like a lamb returning to the slaughter. When I finally drifted off, it was nearly dawn. Pale morning light crept through the curtains. The house was quiet now, no clinking glasses, no fake cheer, just the dull hum of the old heater trying to fight off the Illinois chill. I woke up in my childhood bedroom. The walls were still painted in the faded pink of a girl who once believed that if she tried hard enough, love would follow. On the shelf, dusty trophies still sat, tiny shrines to a daughter they once pretended to be proud of. I stared at the ceiling, half hoping the night before had been a dream. But then my phone buzzed. One notification lit up the cracked screen. Bank alert. Your checking account balance is below $100.
What?
I opened my banking app and the numbers hit me like a slap. Balance, $87.24. I scrolled through the transactions, my hands suddenly ice cold. Luxury nails, spa, $320. Designer Galleria, $1,200. Bloom and Grace events, $4,800. Then one that made my stomach drop. Transfer to Sable and CO. Business account, $12,000. My chest tightened. My eyes stung, but no tears came. Only the rising hum of fury in my ears. I called the bank. After minutes of being on hold, a representative answered. Yes, ma'am. All transactions were initiated from your device. My device? I asked. Yes, and all from a shared IP address. Do you allow anyone else access to your accounts? Not anymore. I ended the call, numb. My reflection in the phone screen stared back, pale, worn, but eerily calm. Underneath the shock, something deeper pulsed, clarity. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. My family hadn't just cut me out emotionally, they were draining me of anything useful before discarding me completely. I crossed the room and stood in front of the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't broken. She was waking up. I opened the old desk drawer and pulled out my laptop. I had a folder labeled Family Assets, 2021 to present. Inside, hundreds of files, screenshots, receipts, texts, every time they borrowed, every time I paid. There it was. The check I wrote for Mom's property taxes that never got returned. Sable's business loan I co-signed. Dad's wire request when his pension froze. Bit by bit, I had been buying their love and now I had the receipts. You always told me to document everything, Mom, I whispered. Guess that lesson stuck. Then came the email. From Sable. Subject: FYI, financial clarification. Hi Scarlett, just confirming the recent transfers were for family-related needs. You've always been generous. We'll sort it later. Hope you're okay. Love S.
Love.
Like that word meant anything now. I started typing a reply, then stopped.
No.
She didn't deserve a response. Not yet. Instead, I opened a new message. This one to GW, the discreet attorney who once helped a colleague settle a family property dispute. I attached the files one by one. My hands didn't shake. Subject: misuse of personal assets, confidential. Each document uploaded felt like a stone laid on a new foundation. I wasn't being petty. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was drawing a line. They wanted me gone? Fine. But not quietly. Not free of consequence. I clicked send. The heater rumbled on again. I stepped into the hallway. The walls were lined with old family portraits, birthdays, vacations, holidays. Sable stood in the center of almost every frame. In one, I was cropped halfway out. My arm was the only visible part of me. That detail never bothered me before. Now it explained everything. I paused at the stairs. Downstairs, I heard my mother's voice. She's just upset. She'll calm down. Then Sable's smug reply. She won't do anything. She never does. I turned back, silent, almost amused. They still thought I was that obedient girl. But that girl was long gone. Back in my room, I sat by the window. Snow blanketed the front lawn. The sky was gray, heavy with more to come. My fingers tapped a slow rhythm on the windowsill, the same rhythm I used when I was waiting for something important. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I was preparing. I looked at my phone again. The email sat in my sent folder, quiet but loaded like a fuse. Downstairs, laughter echoed.
Hollow. Practiced.
But it no longer pierced me. Let them laugh. They thought the silence meant surrender. They were wrong. Because I knew now, the truth doesn't stay buried forever. Especially when you stop burying it yourself. The next morning arrived gray and brittle, the kind of cold that crept into your bones before you even stepped outside. I hadn't slept much again. The house groaned through the night, wind pushing against the window like it wanted to get in. I made coffee in the quiet kitchen, the same pot my mother had used for decades, the handle worn smooth. It was strange how an object could outlast the truth. I sat in the library, the one room of the house that still smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. Books lined the walls, their spines faded and cracked. My father had always called it his thinking room. Now it was my refuge. I had my laptop open on the table, the faint hum of the heater filling the silence. I was rereading the email I'd sent the night before to the lawyer, making sure every attachment had gone through. That was when I heard a light knock. Soft, almost hesitant. Scarlett. It was Rowena, my aunt by marriage, quiet, observant, never one for gossip. She stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. She looked around before speaking, as if checking for hidden ears. I thought you'd be here, she said softly. You always liked this room. She carried a manila envelope tucked under her arm, the edges worn. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed it on the desk in front of me. What's that? I asked, my voice cautious. She exhaled, pulling a chair beside me. Something you should have seen years ago. When she opened the flap, I saw legal documents. Old, yellowed pages stamped with seals. The words property deed, Naperville residence caught my eye. Rowena pointed to a line halfway down the page. Your father transferred the deed to you in 2019. Quietly, before Sable took over the accounts. I blinked, unsure if I heard her right. That's impossible. The house is in his name. I've seen the paperwork. Her eyes softened. You've seen the revised paperwork. They've kept the original hidden in their safe for years. I leaned back, the air thick around me. Why would he, and why wouldn't anyone tell me? Because he changed his mind, she said, lowering her voice. Marceline convinced him it wasn't fair to Sable. Said it would make the family look divided. So, they hid the transfer, told the lawyer to file a corrected version. But the first one, she tapped the page gently, is still legal. For a long moment I couldn't speak. The house, the one they'd humiliated me in, the one they'd tried to erase me from, was mine. I shouldn't even have this, Rowena added, glancing toward the door. If they find out I took it, they'll cut me off too. Why tell me now? I whispered. She gave me a look that was half sorrow, half warning. Because I saw what they did to you at dinner. And because I know what it's like to be erased. I was married to a man like Orion once. They want obedience, not truth. Her words sink deep, settling in that quiet place inside me where anger had already taken root. Before I could thank her, a faint buzz came from my phone. A new email notification. The subject line read, "Please respect our wishes regarding Scarlett." It was forwarded from my cousin Lila. My stomach turned as I opened it. The sender, Sable. The message was polite, sickeningly so. "Dear family, as many of you know, Scarlett is going through a difficult time and has chosen to distance herself from the family. Out of respect for her healing process, please avoid contacting her directly. We'll keep you updated when she's ready to reconnect. Thank you for your understanding and continued love." The CC list had 46 names.
Aunts.
Cousins. Old family friends. My name wasn't among them. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My hands went cold. "Those snakes," Rowena muttered under her breath when she saw my face. "They're building a narrative, making you the unstable one." It wasn't shock this time. It was a slow, simmering recognition, the realization that this wasn't chaos. It was strategy. I scrolled through the email chain, tracing older threads. Subtle changes in tone. People who had once texted me every week had gone silent. Invitations that stopped arriving. The pattern was unmistakable. Isolate, discredit, erase. "They've been planning this for months," I said quietly. "Probably since Dad's health scare last spring." Rowena nodded. "Sable's been meeting with their lawyer almost every week.
Said she was helping him with estate planning.
I should have known." I rubbed my temples. My pulse felt heavy in my throat. They're covering their tracks. And now, they're rewriting the story to make me the problem. Rowena placed her hand on mine. "Scarlett, listen to me. You have to protect yourself, legally, emotionally, all of it. They'll play nice in public, but they won't stop until they've taken everything." "I'm already a ghost," I said bitterly. "What more can they take?" She looked me straight in the eye. "Your silence." The truth hit harder than anything else had that week. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint tick of the old clock on the wall. I could feel the weight of the envelope between us, the proof that I wasn't powerless, even if they'd tried to convince me otherwise. Finally, I reached for it, sliding the documents back into their sleeve. "I won't be quiet anymore." Rowena nodded, relief flickering across her face. "Good. Because they count on your restraint, your kindness. That's how they win." I stood, pacing toward the window. Snow had started falling again, coating the garden in white. Everything looked peaceful from up here, serene even. But underneath, the roots of rot were deep. I turned back to her. "If I leave, they'll think they won. If I stay, they'll keep pretending I don't exist." Rowena smiled faintly. "Then don't do either. Stay long enough to learn, then leave on your terms. With proof." Her words lingered as she stood to go. She hesitated at the door. "Scarlett, I meant what I said. I've been where you are. Choose the fight, not the silence." "I already have," I replied. After she left, I sat back at the table, the envelope still warm in my hands. I opened it again, tracing the ink of my name on the line, Scarlett L. Keene. The signature was my father's, but the intent was mine to claim now. I took my phone, snapped a photo of each page carefully, and uploaded them to my private cloud folder. I renamed the file, reclaiming what's mine. As the progress bar filled, I felt something shift, subtle but certain. They thought they buried me under lies and legal tricks, but what they'd really done was hand me the shovel. The following morning began with a strange kind of quiet, not peace, but the silence that comes after a storm when the air is heavy with what's been destroyed. I sat at the small desk in my room, watching frost crawl across the window pane. The photos of the house deed from Rowena's envelope still sat open on my laptop screen, proof that I wasn't crazy, that everything I'd given to this family wasn't a delusion. But proof didn't bring comfort. It brought clarity, and with it, the ache of knowing there was no going back. Marceline called for tea with the guests that afternoon, her voice echoing down the hallway like nothing had happened. The same sugary tone, the same pretense. My instinct was to stay upstairs and avoid her little performance, but something in me needed to see it through. You don't recognize rot until you look at the wood close enough. I went down to the living room around 3. The air smelled like lemon polish and denial. The fireplace flickered softly, framed by a new decoration above the mantel. At first glance, it looked like one of Dad's old photos, a family portrait, newly framed, glossy, perfect. Everyone was there. Mom, Dad, Sable, her husband, the kids. I stepped closer. My breath caught halfway. In the corner where I should have been, a space that once held me standing between my parents, there was no Scarlet. The background behind them had been blurred slightly, just enough to hide the alteration. A vase of white lilies now occupied my place. It wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. Someone had erased me, pixel by pixel. No one said a word. The guests chatted lightly, sipping their tea, pretending not to notice. But I saw Sable's eyes flick toward me, her smirk twitching just enough to betray satisfaction. New frame? I asked, my voice steady. Marceline smiled, without looking up from her cup.
Yes.
It fits the decor better. I nodded slowly, my jaw tightening. The air in the room felt thick. I couldn't breathe. I turned toward the window, pretending to admire the view, but inside my chest, my heart beat like a drum in a locked room. I wasn't angry in that moment. I was hollow. They had taken my place not just in the room, but in memory. I stayed through the charade, listening to them talk about community events, church donations, and their new family outreach fund. It was all for show, of course. Everything they did was theater, carefully curated kindness for others while rotting each other from within. Later that evening, there was a family brunch, another excuse to gloat over their perfect image. I joined late, just as Sable was telling a story about her latest business venture, her hands moving elegantly in the air as she laughed. That's when I saw it. The ring. Grandma Arla's gold heirloom. Oval cut, blue sapphire center, glinting on Sable's finger as she gestured. I froze. For over 10 years, that ring had sat on my own hand. My grandmother had given it to me when I turned 21, saying, "This one belongs to the girl who still believes in decency." I'd worn it every Christmas since. Until last week, when it mysteriously vanished from my jewelry box. "That's my ring," I said quietly, cutting into Sable's story. The conversation around the table stopped. Sable looked down at her hand, feigning surprise. "Oh, this? Mom gave it to me this morning. Said Grandma would have wanted it with me." My stomach twisted. "She gave it to me.
You know that."
Mom didn't flinch. She stirred her tea and said, "It's in better hands now, Scarlet." The way she said it, casual, as if she were correcting a misplaced napkin, made the whole room tilt. I stared at the ring. It caught the light and shimmered, exactly as it had when Grandma had placed it in my palm years ago. It looked colder now. For a moment, I thought I'd shout, demand it back. But instead, I inhaled deeply and exhaled slower than ever before. "Then you can have it," I said, though every syllable burned. I caught my reflection in the polished silver teapot sitting on the table, distorted but steady. My eyes met my own for the first time in weeks. If they wanted to turn me into the villain of their story, I'd give them one worth fearing. Without a word, I took out my phone under the table and typed a short message to my lawyer, advanced to phase 2. The reply came within minutes. Understood. Will initiate documentation transfer. I slid the phone into my coat pocket and folded my napkin carefully, laying it beside my untouched plate. The chatter resumed around me, oblivious. They thought I'd accepted my place. They thought I was broken. After brunch, I went upstairs, closing the door softly behind me. My hands trembled slightly, not from sadness, but from restraint. On the dresser sat a small wooden box, my keepsake chest. Inside were letters, photographs, tiny mementos of a family that had never really been mine. I opened it slowly, fingers brushing across a photo of me and Rowena, taken at my high school graduation. We looked happy then, two people who hadn't yet learned how cruel blood could be. Next to it was an old Christmas card from Grandma Arla, written in her shaky handwriting. "Never let them tell you what you're worth." I smiled faintly, though my throat ached. I took out 3 items, the printed deed photo, the picture with Rowena, and the original appraisal of Grandma's ring. Those were truths I still needed. The rest, the childhood letters, birthday cards, and trinkets of false affection, I carried to the fireplace. The flames caught quickly. The edges of paper curled inward, words turning to ash. The room smelled faintly of smoke and release. It didn't feel like destruction. It felt like pruning, burning away the dead parts to make room for what still lived. I stood there, watching the fire flicker against the reflection of my face in the glass. For the first time, I didn't see a victim. I saw someone who had survived the worst of their manipulation and still had power left to use. The old sentimental weight that had kept me tethered to this house, to their approval, burned away piece by piece. By the time the flames dimmed, I felt light, dangerous almost. I sat back at the desk, pulled up my email, and attached a scanned copy of the ring's appraisal to a new message. The subject line read, Item 14, Stolen Inheritance. My hands didn't shake anymore. I pressed send, then leaned back in my chair. The hum of the wind outside blended with the faint crackle of the fire behind me. The sound was steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. I looked at the empty space on my hand where the ring used to be. It didn't ache anymore. It was just space ready for something new. I stood, taking one last look around the room. The curtains swayed softly with the draft, the faint scent of smoke still lingering. They took what was mine, I whispered to the empty air. Now I'll take back what they fear most to control. The morning light in downtown Naperville shimmered off frozen sidewalks, casting long, pale reflections across parked cars. It was the kind of winter sun that promised nothing, no warmth, no comfort, just a sharp gleam over cold surfaces. I tugged my coat tighter around me and pushed through the door of a small cafe tucked between a florist and an antique bookstore. A bell above the door rang. No one looked up. Good. I made my way to the far corner, by a window fogged faintly from the warmth inside. I placed my laptop on the table with quiet precision, like laying down tools before a procedure. This wasn't a casual visit. This was the first incision. The waitress approached. I barely looked up. Black coffee. No sugar. She nodded and left. I plugged in my charger, connected to the cafe's VPN-secured network, and clicked into the encrypted folder labeled case S_001, estrangement and asset recovery. Inside, years of silent collection. Bank statements, wire transfers, real estate deeds, screenshots, email threads with passive-aggressive subtext, handwritten notes from arguments I wasn't meant to overhear. I clicked Upload All. The barista returned and set the coffee down gently, as if sensing the intensity radiating from my side of the table. I gave a short nod, eyes fixed on the progress bar. It ticked up, 4%, 12%, 23%, each tick echoing like a drumbeat in my chest. Then my phone vibrated. The signal I'd been waiting for. I answered without hesitation. It's done, I whispered. All files sent. Confirm receipt. There was a pause. Then a low voice answered, clipped and confident. Received. Secure. We'll act accordingly.
Click.
I sat back and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The pulse in my neck eased. My fingers finally uncurled. This moment was years in the making. Step 1, complete. By midday, I was back on the suburban roads leading toward my family's estate. Snow had started to gather on the hedges lining the driveways, and the lampposts glowed faintly, even in daylight. I kept the radio on low, the songs buried under the hum of tires against icy pavement. The group text from earlier had invited me, grudgingly, to the annual seasonal thank you brunch, a tradition where everyone played nice and pretended there were no cracks in the foundation. At exactly 2:30, I pulled into the circular driveway. I paused before stepping out, smoothing my coat collar and brushing invisible lint from my sleeves. Armor on. Smile off. The front door opened before I could knock. A cousin greeted me with that rehearsed smile, the kind reserved for relatives you don't like, but can't avoid. Oh, you made it, she said. I stepped inside.
Yes.
I did. The scent of cinnamon rolls and coffee filled the house. Laughter floated from the dining room, where glasses clinked and soft music played beneath the murmur of conversation. I passed the coat rack without hanging mine. I wasn't staying long. Inside, I navigated the polite chaos, hugs from aunts, stilted greetings from distant uncles, murmured updates about children I didn't know. Their eyes scanned me the way art collectors judge a painting they've already decided not to buy. Then I saw her. Sable. Sitting by the fireplace like she owned it, legs crossed just so, her designer ring glinting with every flicker of firelight. Her expression serene, unbothered, triumphant. Our mother stood nearby, charming as ever. Her voice rose and fell like a practice melody. Dad was by the window, silhouetted against a sky turning milk gray with approaching snow. I gave Sable a single nod. She barely blinked. I slipped into a corner seat by the hallway, close enough to hear everything, far enough not to be part of anything. Invisible but alert. Conversations danced around the room. European travel plans, school recitals, new properties being purchased in Arizona. Their world spun as though I had never been part of it. I watched. I waited. I let the weight of the documents in that shared drive pulse quietly in my pocket. And then I stood. No speech.
No toast.
No raised voice. Just motion, sudden and sharp. The room froze. One by one they noticed. Sable's story halted mid-sentence. Her smile faltered. My mother's cup rattled softly against the saucer. Dad turned, brow creased. I adjusted my coat and walked toward the foyer, each step slow, deliberate. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just done. The door clicked shut behind me. Outside, snow was falling. Soft, deliberate flakes like ash after a fire. I stood there for a beat, letting the cold sting my cheeks. Then I pulled out my phone. I opened my email app, tapped send all, and released the curated collection to every guest inside. The subject line was simple. In case you wondered why I stood up. A moment later, through the frosted glass of the living room windows, I saw them checking their phones. One cousin blinked and tilted his screen toward another. Whispers.
Gasps.
My mother's hand flew to her mouth. And Sable just stared at her phone, as if it had turned to stone in her palm. I watched for one more second, then turned and walked away. My boots left clean imprints in the snow. But behind me, the cracks had begun to spider through their perfect facade. Let them wonder. Let them unravel. This was not a breakdown. It was a beginning. Predators don't retreat. They calculate. They return. And next time, they bring teeth. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating relentlessly against the nightstand. The room was dim, the pale light of morning pressing against the curtains. For a second, I thought maybe I was dreaming, that strange, anxious half-sleep that feels more real than morning itself. But when I reached for my phone, the screen told a different story. 38 missed calls. 27 messages. Most were from family numbers I hadn't heard from in months. Some I'd even blocked. A text from my cousin Lila sat at the top. You need to hear this. Right now. I clicked the link. A recording began to play. The first voice was unmistakable, Marceline's.
Calm. Poised.
Commanding. The kind of voice that had hosted charity galas, church dinners, and holiday brunches for years. Scarlett's been a problem for too long, she said, her tone clipped and cold. We have to finish this. Quietly. Then Sable's laugh followed. Don't worry, Mom. I've already started cleaning up her mess. Once the accounts are finalized, she's out for good. She won't even have a key to her name. There was a pause. Marceline's voice dropped lower.
Good.
When this is over, she won't exist to anyone. Not family, not friends. We'll make sure of it. The audio stopped. For a full minute, I couldn't breathe. I replayed it twice, each time feeling something new. First shock, then vindication. And finally, something heavier than anger, grief. Because it was real. And it had always been real. Someone had posted the recording anonymously on a private family forum. Lila had forwarded it before anyone could delete it. Within hours, it had already spread. The family group chat was chaos, messages firing back and forth. Is this real? Who would record something like this? This can't be her, right? That's her voice. I'd know it anywhere. I put the phone down on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling. The cracks in the plaster ran like veins across the surface. My chest felt hollow, not from the betrayal itself, that wound was old, but from the exposure of it. It was like someone had pulled the curtain back and finally let light hit what had been rotting in the dark for years. By noon, the entire extended family knew. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching snow slide off the branches outside. My inbox was filling again. Some messages were sympathetic, others cautious, people pretending they hadn't believed every word Marceline had said about me for years. But one email stood out. The sender name was hidden. The subject line read, "From an old friend." Curiosity pushed me to open it. Inside was a single Dropbox link. The file name, Marceline_confession_2015, MP4. My stomach dropped. I hesitated for a moment, then clicked. The video opened to a grainy frame, my mother, sitting in what looked like a therapist's office. Her posture was rigid, her hands clutched around a tissue she hadn't used. Her voice, when it came, was soft. I resented Scarlett from the moment she started walking, she said. She reminded me of everything I never became, stubborn, independent, too much like my own mother. Sable was easy. She stayed where I could see her. But Scarlet made me feel small. She paused, eyes flicking toward the camera. I don't hate her. I just wish she didn't exist to remind me of all the things I failed at. The video froze there for a second, then ended. I closed my laptop, hands trembling slightly. Was it uploaded by mistake? Or was someone, maybe Rowena, maybe a ghost from the family archives, finally pushing the truth into daylight? Either way, the damage was done. Within hours, the video spread like wildfire through every relative, every old church friend, every community group that had once called us the perfect family. The messages came faster now. Scarlet, I saw the video. I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve this. We all wondered what was going on behind closed doors. Behind closed doors. They said it like the house hadn't been made of glass. By late afternoon, Sable was in full panic mode. She started calling cousins, claiming the recordings were edited, that I'd manipulated them to make her look bad. It's Scarlet, she hissed in one leaked voicemail I later heard. She's behind all of it. Who else could have done this? But denial doesn't erase audio. It doesn't silence truth. And the truth had a way of echoing long after the lies stopped. Orion, my father, didn't call, didn't text. Not even once. His silence was an answer of its own. That evening, while the family group chat imploded, I drove quietly into town. The sky was gray again, the kind that presses down like a lid. I parked outside the notary office, took a deep breath, and walked inside. The clerk looked up from her counter. Afternoon, she said warmly. I smiled faintly. I'm here to file an asset claim. Property title correction. I have all the documents ready. She nodded, pulling out the necessary forms. You've got identification and verification of ownership? I handed her the manila envelope, the one Rowena had given me, along with the deed photo, notarized copies, and digital certifications. Her eyes widened slightly as she scanned the paperwork. You've had this for a while, she said. Too long, I replied. When I signed my name on the dotted line, my hand didn't shake. There was no adrenaline rush, no righteous fury.
Just calm.
The quiet satisfaction of something inevitable. I've waited years for this, I told her as she stamped the form. And I won't be waiting anymore. When it was done, I stepped outside. The sun was setting, painting the snow orange and gold. My phone buzzed again, a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer.
But something told me to.
Hello. A calm male voice responded, deliberate and composed. Scarlet Keene? Yes. This is Gabriel W., your attorney's partner. We've received confirmation from the court clerk. The deed's reinstatement is filed. Congratulations. I exhaled, relief washing through me. Thank you. He paused. But there's more. The exposure has reached beyond your family circle. Media inquiries have started coming in. If you're ready, we can begin the public case. For a moment, I didn't respond. I watched a small group of children across the street throwing snowballs, their laughter breaking through the evening air. I'm ready, I said finally. My voice didn't tremble. Let's begin. As I ended the call, a deep stillness settled inside me. Not the fragile kind that cracks under pressure, but the solid calm of someone who's stopped running. The wind picked up, tugging at the edges of my coat as I turned toward the parking lot. The town around me buzzed faintly, cars passing, lights flickering, life continuing as mine reset itself. For the first time in my life, the noise of their world didn't reach me. Their power was crumbling, their masks dissolving under the light they'd tried to avoid. The truth was out. And as I walked toward my car, the final thought came unbidden, clear and sharp as the winter air. The game was never about staying in the family. It was about surviving it. The drive home felt slower than usual, though the traffic was light. The sky hung low and heavy, bruised with purples and ash-gray clouds. Snow, once soft and white, had turned to grimy slush along the roads. Tires hissed as I passed, the world outside my windshield muted and wet. Each mile felt like I was peeling away from something, or maybe finally severing it. My chest still held the weight of everything that had unfolded in recent days. The confrontation, the legal maneuvers, the shattered illusions, but strangely, it didn't feel like a burden anymore. It felt like clarity. Cold, sharp clarity. The kind that cuts through years of fog. The kind that hurts, but heals. When I pulled into my apartment's garage, I sat still for a few minutes. The engine ticking. My hands still on the wheel. Then, with a breath, I reached for my phone. I had silenced it for nearly a day, not wanting to hear the inevitable storm that followed truth. But now I was ready. News alerts poured in as I unlocked the screen. Local family feud erupts over inheritance battle. Charity scandal. Sable Keene steps down from civic fund. Keene family's perfect image crumbles. I scrolled further. Sable's face, always camera ready, always composed, was suddenly absent from community websites and social media ads. Sponsors had dropped her within hours. The charity gala she had worked so hard to organize was officially canceled. And on Instagram, her comment section was a battlefield. Snake emojis, screenshots of contracts, people reposting her tone-deaf interviews. Public support was evaporating like breath on a window pane. It wasn't just my story anymore. The lie she built was unraveling in front of everyone. I turned the screen off and leaned back in the seat. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to defend myself. Let them talk. Let them gossip. Let them debate who was wrong and who deserved what. I no longer needed to participate in the performance. I had already exited the stage. Hours later, seated with my legal team in a downtown office, I flipped open the 2019 deed again, the original one, the version Sable thought was buried. Clause 4.7. Should the original beneficiary be removed, disinherited, or erased by majority consensus, said assets shall revert in entirety to the disinherited party. A clause they hadn't noticed. But I had. We moved fast. Within 3 hours, all shared bank accounts were frozen. Property trusts were redirected. Control of utilities, access to accounts, and shared corporate documents locked.
Passwords changed.
Authority revoked. A notification popped up mid-meeting. Orion's business line had gone dead mid-call with a client. Another. Marceline's luxury spa account was declined at checkout. Sable's household assistant tried using a shared card and was denied. I sat back and watched the dominoes fall. I didn't need to raise my voice. My silence did the work. Back home, I opened a blank email draft. Subject: Final notice. Body: access to my life was a privilege. Consider it revoked. I sent it to every family email I had stored. Every address I had once used for holidays, birthdays, or meaningless check-ins. Then I waited. For hours, nothing.
No responses. No replies.
Just a long, satisfying silence. Until one text appeared. From Rowena. Proud of you. It wasn't a victory chant. It wasn't a flood of support. But it was a moment of stillness that broke through the noise. A quiet ripple that spread through me. Later that afternoon, I drove past the old Keene estate. The place looked the same, but something was different. The aura of entitlement that used to hang around it like fog was gone. I noticed the locks on the front gate had been changed. A locksmith's tag was still taped to the mailbox. I pulled over a few houses down and watched from a distance. Sable's sleek silver car was parked crooked in the driveway. She was outside, pounding on the front door, her fist thudding against the thick wood like a metronome of desperation. No one answered. The windows were still. A neighbor across the street, probably unaware of the full story, stood inside filming the scene from behind their curtain. Moments later, the video was already circulating online. When the villain gets evicted. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. But I did feel something closure, maybe. Let them see her locked out, screaming into the void. Let them witness the fall from the pedestal she built with stolen bricks. That evening, I returned not to the house, but to the lake behind it. The lake where we used to skip stones as kids. Where laughter once echoed. Where lies started small, like ripples. In my hand, I held one last remnant. A master key, once Orion's, now meaningless. It had once opened every door in that house. I let it dangle from my fingers for a moment, catching the fading winter light. Then I let it go. It sliced into the icy water with barely a splash, swallowed whole. The surface stilled again, like it had never happened. I stayed there, letting the cold air sting my cheeks, letting the snow collect on my coat. No one ever tells you that cutting ties feels like mourning, but it does. It's grief mixed with resolve. Peace doesn't arrive at your door in a neat envelope. You have to earn it. Sometimes you have to scorch the path behind you just to finally feel the warmth of the fire ahead. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. The first morning of the new year came quietly. No fireworks, no champagne, just a pale gray dawn spilling through the curtains of a house that didn't quite feel like mine, yet no longer belonged to anyone else. The air inside was still, carrying that faint, cold scent of winter wood and dust. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone lukewarm. My suitcase leaned against the wall beside me, half-sipped, waiting. Outside, the world was blanketed in soft snow, not untouched, but forgiving. Before I left, there was one thing I had to do. I took a small cream-colored envelope from my coat pocket and slid a folded letter inside. My handwriting, still slightly uneven, stretched across the page in ink that smudged at the edges. You saw me when no one else did. Thank you, Rowena. I hope the world is kinder to you than it was to me. Tucked behind it was a photo, the old house in summer, taken long before everything curdled between us all. The shutters were open, the hydrangeas in bloom, sunlight washing over the front steps. That photo had lived in my desk drawer for years, untouched. Now it belonged somewhere it could mean something again. I pulled on my gloves and stepped outside, the snow creaking under my boots. Rowena's cottage was just 2 blocks down, small and warm-looking, a single yellow light glowing in the window. I slipped the envelope into her mailbox and rested my hand on the metal for a moment. Goodbye, I whispered. By the time I turned back toward the main road, the sun had begun to rise, slicing through the haze in thin streaks of pink and gold. It looked almost like forgiveness. The house was empty when I returned. My footsteps echoed faintly on the old wooden floor. I walked slowly from room to room, not out of sadness, but respect, the way you visit a place that once held your whole world. The wallpaper in the hallway still bore faint pencil marks from when I'd measured my height as a kid. I traced them lightly with my finger. The kitchen counters were scrubbed bare, the cabinets hollow. I ran my palm along the dining table, the same one where they'd announced I was no longer part of the family. The memory didn't sting anymore. When I reached the living room, sunlight spilled through the tall windows, touching the floorboards I'd once danced across in socked feet when I was 7. I could still hear faint echoes of laughter from years gone, the good kind, from before things soured. This place doesn't own me anymore, I said aloud. My voice sounded steady, almost serene. I smiled, then turned toward the front door. That afternoon, I sat in a small downtown cafe with my laptop open. The screen glowed with the first draft of something that had been building inside me for months, maybe years. The title read, "Estrangement isn't cruelty, sometimes it's survival." It wasn't a rant or a confession. It was a truth spoken plainly, written for people who had been told for too long that family was sacred, even when it destroyed them. I clicked publish. Within hours, messages began to flood in, comments, emails, DMs. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. You just told my story. You made me feel less alone. I scrolled through them slowly, absorbing the kindness in every line. For the first time, I realized my story had stopped being about revenge. It had become something else, a mirror for others to see themselves in, to find their own way out. A week later, I wandered into a local bookstore, my last stop before leaving town. I browsed the shelves aimlessly, pretending to look for something I didn't need. And that's when I saw her. Marceline. She was standing by the memoir section, her posture smaller than I remembered, her coat too big for her frame. Her once impeccable hair was now streaked with gray. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Her eyes flickered with something, regret, fear, maybe both. She clutched a paperback in her hand, but didn't seem to see it. You win, she said finally, her voice low, brittle. I took a step closer, not to confront her, but to speak softly enough that only she could hear. There were no winners, Mom, I said. Just survivors. She looked away first. I didn't feel pity, just peace. I turned and walked toward the door, the small bell above it chiming as it closed behind me. The next morning, I loaded the last of my things into the car. The air smelled like snow melt, fresh and new. I was heading west toward Seattle. A new job, a new apartment, a place where my name meant only what I made of it. As the car engine hummed to life, I turned on my playlist titled Freedom. The first song began softly, a voice humming through the speakers, tender and strong. Halfway down the road, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Rowena. A photo appeared, a blooming tree standing in the old yard behind the house. Beneath it, her message read, "Spring's early this year." I smiled. The road ahead stretched out in a long ribbon of gray and silver, mountains faint in the distance. For once, I didn't look back. I wasn't erased. I rewrote myself. Sometimes, family isn't defined by blood, but by how they treat you when you're at your lowest. Scarlett's journey shows us that walking away from cruelty, even when it wears the mask of kinship, is not weakness, but survival. Have you ever had to choose peace over people? If Scarlett's story resonated with you, share your thoughts below. Your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real, raw family stories that dig deep into the truths many are too afraid to speak.